Dear Parishioner, I hope this short reflection finds you and your family well and managing to maintain a modicum of sanity at this strange and anxious time. I would like to invite you to undertake a short journey of prayer and reflection based on today's readings, and especially on that hugely significant passage from the Gospel of John. If you have a Bible to hand, you might find that helpful to enable you to access the scripture passages in full. Today is Divine Mercy Sunday. It's a feast given to the Church by Saint Pope John Paul II in 2000, the year in which he canonized the Polish nun Faustina Kowalska, who experienced a series of visions of Christ. The feast reassures us that Christ's mercy extends to each of us in our condition of human frailty. Our first reading is from the Acts of the Apostles. Now, on one level, this reading is as far removed from present reality as we could imagine. There is no communal life, which Luke refers to in verse 42. There is no meeting together in our time, at least not yet. Yet daily we do see evidence of wonders and signs being performed. We do see evidence of bread being broken in our homes as we begin to relearn or perhaps learn the simple joy of eating together. And daily too we are witness to the self-sacrifice of many who put others before self. In his letter, Peter tells his recipients, "You did not see Christ, yet you love him, and still without seeing him, you are already filled with a joy so glorious because you believe." The letter of Peter is not speaking to a pandemic age. He's 2,000 years removed from that. Yet he offers hope in a time of fear, and he is all too well aware that suffering is part of being human. The Gospel today begins with those transforming words. In the evening of that same day, the first day of the week, the doors were closed in the room where they were for fear of the Jews. Jesus came and stood among them. He said to them, "Peace be with you." And he showed them his hands and his side. "8 days later, the disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. The doors were closed, but Jesus came in and stood among them. "Peace be with you," he said. Then he spoke to Thomas. "Put your finger here. Look, here are my hands. Give me your hand. Put it into my side. Doubt no longer, but believe." Thomas replied, "My Lord and my God." Here's the all too familiar story of doubting Thomas, who refuses to believe unless he can put his finger into the pierced hands and wounded side of a now risen Jesus. Jesus' words, however, are addressed not only to Thomas, but to all of us. Happy are those who have not seen yet believe. Our faith isn't found in the evidence of the wounds, as the case with Thomas, nor is it found on the appearance of the Lord in a locked room like the disciples. It's based on love, like that of the beloved disciple who believed even though he did not see the Lord. Like Thomas, we too may have questions about the resurrection as we seek reassurance in such reality, and no more so than in our current experience, where the threshold between life and death is so often very fine. John's Gospel earlier reassures us that Jesus is about to ascend to his Father. And here now, in the midst of the disciples, he shows himself as a bridge between the disciples and the Father, between the spheres of the human and the divine. And how is his presence made known? It is revealed precisely in the fact that he brings peace in the midst of fear. Peace be with you, are his opening words, words of reassurance, words of comfort, words which are intended to dispel the fear that is so pervading. Our current moment reminds us that we cannot always sustain an abiding, peaceful presence, because there is much that will shake our confidence and test our faith. But that's precisely how Jesus sees himself, present in the midst of turmoil, in the midst of uncertainty, the calmness in a raging sea. Like Thomas, we probably have our own criteria for believing, and the witness of the community may not figure among them, as it didn't for Thomas. He is demanding physical verification, but his desire for proof is not particularly well placed. Jesus, if anything, is not a resuscitated corpse, so Thomas cannot probe these wounds in the way that he thinks he can. And not for the first time, John reminds us that faith is not born of physical observation, but of spiritual truth. In fact, as the storyteller and theologian Jack Shea reminds us, it is the community of believers, enlivened by the presence of the risen Christ, that Thomas comes to know Jesus at a level that eluded him when he knew Jesus in the flesh. Now, perhaps more than ever, that remains the reality for us. Our individual faith is sustained in the community of the faithful, united in the knowledge that we still share in the one bread and the one body, despite the physical limitations. We recall the words of Cardinal Vincent this Easter Sunday, when he said, "Although we cannot physically break bread sacramentally, we can become spiritually united with Jesus by inviting him into our hearts." Now, perhaps more than ever, we need that spiritual comfort. Shea challenges us to reflect on the following. When we love someone very deeply, we instinctively fear they will die and leave us. The stronger the sense of togetherness, the stronger the fear of separation. But when the physical falls away, the spiritual communion remains. And when the physical is absent, the emptiness can be experienced not only as loss, but as possibility. There is a new form of presence. It is not waiting for us beyond death. And even though the doors are locked, he or she is in our midst. On the spiritual level, we are never orphaned. Shea concludes by inviting us to ponder two questions. Firstly, can this indeed be true? And secondly, how in fact do we live this question of the resurrection? And on this Divine Mercy Sunday, we may reflect too on the opening words of Pope Francis's Misericordiae Vultus, as he proclaimed an extraordinary Jubilee year of mercy in 2015. Jesus Christ, he said, is the face of God's mercy.